How do you see right now, Scott? Do you think that the position of Donald Trump and his administration would be the same as we saw with Joe Biden and his administration, or they're going to do some important changes in their attitude in Ukraine?
Well, you have to keep in mind that the advisors to Donald Trump come from the same stock as the advisors that advised Joe Biden and advised Barack Obama before him, advised Donald Trump during his first administration. These are Russophobic minded people whose singular goal is the destruction of Russia. Straight up simple. They will not accept anything that allows Russia to emerge victorious, even if that victory doesn't infringe on the United States or anything that enhances Russia's stature. This is a purely zero-sum game. Anything that's good for Russia is bad for the United States in the minds of these people. And so long as they advise Donald Trump, that'll be the policy set that they put in. Look, President Putin was being very diplomatic. Lavrov wasn't. Let's just make it as clear as possible. Russia went to war in Ukraine because of Ukraine's potential of becoming a NATO nation. Russia's winning that war. Russia's not going to allow Ukraine ever to be a member of NATO, ever. It's not on the books. It's a waste of time to even discuss it. So anybody in the Trump administration that's putting forward a plan that's postulated on some eventual Ukrainian membership is, as President Putin said accurately, if they're not ready now, that means that you're going to get them ready. And then what happens when they are ready? And Russia's not going to let that happen. So I think, Donald Trump, it appears, recognizes that his plan is in trouble. And so he made a statement the other day that said that basically it's all speculation until he meets with Vladimir Putin. And it's going to be one of the shortest meetings ever, because Putin, there's not going to be any, Trump staring him in the eyes and giving him the Joe Biden, you're evil thing, all that nonsense. It's going to be Trump saying, hey, what about, and Putin will say, no. What about, no. What about, no. And Putin just said, what part of we won the war don't you understand? And if you want to be part of the losing side, you have a chance in history right now to get yourself out of this mess. But if you want to double down on stupid, pour good money after bad, feel free, because we're winning and we're not going to lose. We're willing to put everything into this. What are you willing to put in? And Trump doesn't have an answer to that because Trump's not ready to put everything into it. So I think eventually Trump will have to make some hard decisions that will run against the grain of his Russophobic advisors. But it's either that or just continue this failed policy. Nothing is going to stop Russia from winning this war. There's not enough money. There's not enough military equipment. NATO doesn't have the ability to meaningfully intervene. So nothing's going to stop Russia from winning this war. And that's the hard truth that Donald Trump's going to have to confront. Trump knows that there's two very weak links in the American national security fabric right now. One is Ukraine. He needs to jettison this Ukrainian problem. This has cost America hundreds of billions of dollars, and it's weakened us globally. He needs to jettison that. And he also needs to put NATO on ice. NATO is an organization that's outlived its usefulness. It was a valid, viable organization during the Cold War. Since then, it's become an expansive extension of American imperial hegemony. And I think Trump recognizes that he needs to start focusing on, the things that keep America, relevant in the world today, and not have these parasitic problems attach themselves to America. And NATO is a parasite, sucks the lifeblood out of the United States, and Ukraine is the same thing. So Trump, I think, will eventually make the right decision, but it'll be politically difficult for him.
I think right now, as Putin mentioned in this video, their main doubt is what would come with the new administration, because we know that Donald Trump is pretty much straightforward. He says what he wants. But the administration, Keith Kellogg and all those people that are going to make some sort of policies toward Ukraine and toward Russia, what type of leverage do they have on Donald Trump, in your opinion? Is that going to be Donald Trump at the end of the day deciding about that? Right now, it seems to me that it's not clear in the mind of Russians what would happen. That's why they don't know the leverage these people have on Donald Trump, how Donald Trump would be strong to make the decision at the end of the day.
I don't think the Russians give a damn about Donald Trump. They don't care. They really don't. The notion that Russia's holding on for a miracle, we're holding on by our fingertips. We just got to hang in there a little bit longer, guys, till Donald Trump comes in and saves the day. That's the world according to Donald Trump. Russia's like, we don't care. Donald Trump is an American president, and all American presidents are the same. We don't have any artificial expectations here. We don't, we're not holding out hope. We'll see what he has to say, but we don't care. Our policy remains the same. And that's the Russian approach right now. They just don't care. I mean, they're not holding, they're not, first of all, they're not struggling. The notion that Russia's, oh God, we got to hold on, guys. Hold on, man. Cavalry's coming. Trump ain't the cavalry. It's not for Russia. So no, this is, Americans, we're so egocentric. We believe that the world revolves around us. So somehow many Americans have bought into the notion that Trump is going to save Russia from this problem that is. Trump believes that too. This war should never have happened. It wouldn't have happened had I been president. Wrong answer, Donald Trump. Russia doesn't care about you because you don't know anything about Russia. I mean, the moment the United States actually can sit down at the table and speak intelligently, the moment they can bring somebody like a Jack Matlock, former ambassador to the Soviet Union, to the table instead of bringing idiots like Michael McFaul. Michael McFaul, the Russians just tuned out the Obama administration, said, we're done. You're static noise. We don't listen. Jack Matlock had to listen. Intelligent conversation, knowledgeable. We have to bring somebody of that caliber to the table for the Russians to listen to. Donald Trump's not it. And the Russians will listen to him, but Donald Trump has to understand, and somebody really needs to sit down and whisper him that the best way to solve this thing is to shut up and just get the hell out of there with minimal fuss. If you try to posture, sometimes, when you step into a pile of dog poop and you walk into somebody's home, the best thing to do is turn around and walk out. But Donald Trump's going to sit there, look down and go, oh, I stepped in dog poop. It stinks. I'm going to scrape my shoe here and I'm going to, no, Donald, you're just spreading it around. You can't repair what has been done. NATO and the United States has lost in Ukraine. You're not going to walk out of this with your head held high. You have dog poop on your shoe. Leave the house. That's the best solution for Donald Trump right now. And the sooner he recognizes that, the less they talk about it. Make Ukraine a non-issue. Just unplug and leave. Watch how quickly the world forgets about Ukraine, because Ukraine is as irrelevant as the day is long. Nobody cares about Ukraine. It's only relevant because Western politicians make it so. If you stop talking about it, no one cares. Literally, nobody cares about the Ukrainians. If they did, this would be a far different conflict. If we truly cared about tens of millions of people suffering, from the ravages of war, we do something. Europe's kicking the Ukrainian refugees out, sending them back to a land where there is no heat and electricity because they don't care. We allow a war to continue that has, by some counts, 1.1 million dead soldiers. We don't care. As soon as people realize that, it just becomes clear. The best way to stop stinking up the house is get the dog poop out of the house. People clean up afterwards, but you don't have to announce it. You don't have to say anything. Ukraine is dog poop on the shoe of America. Get it out of the house, scrape it off, clean your shoe, and don't talk about it ever again. That's the best way out of this problem. It's a banderist regime that is despicable. It's a bloodthirsty regime that doesn't care about its own people, and it's an aberration to humanity. And the best way, the most humane solution, again, I know I get in trouble, but I don't care. Atticus Finch, To Kill a Mockingbird, rabid dog in the street, shoot the dog. Ukraine is a rabid dog in society, in humanity today. Shoot the dog, shoot it, get it done with, because otherwise it's going to bite things and make everybody else sick. I know people are going to say, that's cruel, you can't say that. Come up with a better solution. I mean, one that didn't cost Ukraine 1.1 million dead soldiers. Come up with a better solution, you idiots. I mean, I spit in the face of these people. Oh, you allowed a war to go on to kill 1.1 million Ukrainian soldiers. You allowed it. You made it happen. Russia didn't want this. Russia did everything to avoid this. You in the West made this happen. Shoot the dog.
Do you think that the people who are going to work with Donald Trump and Donald Trump himself, they're going to accept the interpretation of the data, the intelligence data coming from the Biden administration, or they're going to get the raw data and they're going to decide about how they're going to interpret those intelligence informations or data that coming from Ukraine? Because this is a huge change for the decisions on the part of the Donald Trump and his administration.
It doesn't matter. Whatever data they use, it doesn't matter. Your question implies that Donald Trump has a vote, that Donald Trump has a say, that Donald Trump matters. He doesn't matter in any of this. He thinks he matters, but he's already walked away from the magic phone call. Remember, I'm one phone call, I can stop this war. You can't, Donald Trump. Russia doesn't care about you. You're a buffoon. Stop being a buffoon, start becoming a serious man, and Russia may care about you. But the first thing to do to become a serious man is get good data. Okay, you have Tulsi Gabbard. Get her in as the director of national intelligence. Make that happen. Then turn to her and say, get me the good stuff. Okay, I'm not here with an agenda. I want the good stuff. Your best analyst. Don't spin it for me. You're not here to sell me a policy. I want the good stuff straight from the hip. Good stuff. But what's happened is the intelligence community's gotten so used to feeding presidents who say Russia must be bad. Imagine if somebody came in and said, boss, Russia's not a threat to us. Not at all. Russia's not going to invade Europe. The Russian military is sized appropriately for its own defensive needs. The troops that they've brought on since 2022 are solely because of NATO expansion and the conflict in Ukraine. If NATO were to be part of a rethinking of European security framework, such as the Russians proposed in their December 17, 2021 treaties, draft treaties, we could probably see the Russian military downsizing to a level that would be equivalent to what existed in 2021, which we didn't deem as a threat to Europe. That's the truth. That's the truth. Mr. President, the Russian defense industry right now, is heavily engaged in producing strategic nuclear deterrent forces. But this is a huge commitment of resources to Russia. If we were to take a realistic look at our needs for strategic deterrence, as opposed to continuing this policy of a preemptive nuclear strike, we could probably save couple $1 trillion over the next 30 years by just downsizing and limiting the modernization to that which is essential, and work with the Russians to bring arms control back into the mix. But Mr. President, we have to approach this from the standpoint of parity. It has to be mutually acceptable. We have to understand that we need to make some fundamental changes in our nuclear doctrine, because the concept of America being nuclear dominant is over. And if we want to continue to pretend that we're nuclear dominant, then we'll be engaged in an arms race that we can't afford. We're not going to win, and probably result in a nuclear conflict where everybody dies. This kind of realistic conversation that needs to be had with Trump. And somebody has to tell Trump when he throws a temper tantrum and say, shut the up, President. Mr. President, stop throwing a temper tantrum. That ain't going to change it. You can fire me, but you hired me to tell you the truth. I'm telling you the truth. And you losing your cool because the facts don't suit your fantasy is your problem, not my problem. I'm not going to change the intelligence to, calm you down. You got to be an adult about this. But nobody has that conversation. Nobody has that conversation. Everybody, oh, yes, Mr. President, what do you want to hear? Russia's bad? Oh, we got an analyst that'll tell you how bad Russia is. What do you want to hear? That their economy is weak? We got one that'll tell you that too. We got an analyst for anything you want. What do you want, Mr. President? We'll just shape the data to please you. And as a result, we get bad policy. Because the only way you can sustain the rules-based international order logically is to lie to yourself. Lie to yourself about how relevant you are. Lie to yourself how powerful you are. Lie to yourself about how what you're doing is changing the world to suit your needs. But it's not. We create this Potemkin village of data, and as soon as it collapses, you see the awful reality. And somebody needs to be honest with this president, and the president has to be, man enough to hear the truth and then adapt accordingly.
We are hearing from Keith Kellogg and the Biden administration that they want to put Ukraine in a better position for whatever comes next in terms of the conflict in Ukraine. But with the aid sending from the United States to Ukraine, and we know the situation with the Ukrainian army, what else can they do for Ukraine? I don't see any European countries being able to send their troops to Ukraine.
Nobody's sending troops. Stop talking about troops. It isn't going to happen. Troops is a major escalation that leads to a nuclear war.
Who's going to fight?
Well, no, it's not who's going to fight. Who's going to die? Again, find me a European country that knows how to die. And, knowing how to die means that you know how to go to war, that you know what's going to happen, that you accept the fact that, on this given day, that regiment's going to suffer 30% casualties because this objective is important enough that when you send in 10,000 men, 3,000 are going to die, and your society is ready to accept that. But those 3,000 die because you actually have a military that understands what killing and being killed is. But it's like anything. Go fight a boxer, a trained boxer, who's had 20 fights under his belt. Put him in the ring against a person who's never fought before. Maybe they're perfect in the gym. I can hit the heavy bag. I can do this. I can do that. Get in the ring. And that person hasn't been hit before. Boxer's going to come in and knock the living snot out of him. Bam, dead. Bam, down. That's what happens when you get a military that's not used to modern combat. Because they're tentative. They're all going to come in. They're going to, what do we do? We fired the weapon at the range, but and the Russians are like, davai. They start killing because they're ready to die. They don't want to die, but they understand that they're going into an environment where death is the norm. And so accepting that, they know the best way to survive is to aggressively push forward and kill the enemy. This is a completely different Russian army that existed in 2022. The Russian army in 2022, Marat Karelin, a wonderful Russian journalist, covered the war in the Donbass from 2014 up until 2022. And he remembers watching the militias grow to become a self-defense force and become sort of a permanent military organization. But it always had this grassroots militia element to it. Informal chain of command, and the tactics were street tactics. They weren't the tactics of a professional military force. And I remember he was talking. He said, "Yeah, when I heard that the Russians intervened, I went to my militia friends and I said, watch, here come the big boys. Watch how they do this." And he said he watched the Russians come in, and after a week he was like, they don't know what the hell they're doing. I mean, they're literally committing suicide. They're running out there without proper security. They're not protecting their flanks. And the Ukrainians are ambushing them. And then he's like, you guys have to go out there and tell them how to survive in this environment. The Russian military is a peacetime military. And like all peacetime, there's a famous book about America's first battles, and it talks about the first battles that America fights throughout wars. And it's basically a story how you take, an American peacetime military and you put it through the horrors of war. And they always lose. They always lose because they hesitate. They're not ready. They're just not, they don't have that killer instinct, but eventually they get the killer instinct and then they're unbeatable. Russians have the killer instinct right now, and NATO doesn't. And by the time NATO figures out how to have the killer instinct, they'll have lost 300, 500,000 men. And they don't have another 300 to 500,000 to put in there who are trained. So NATO's not going to do a damn thing. Not a damn thing.
How Zelensky, Fitzo said in his visit to Moscow, said that Zelensky tried to bribe him.
I don't know. I mean, that's Fico's interpretation of events. I think Zelensky was probably looking at alternative economic options for Slovakia, but not even Zelensky's not stupid enough to just straight out try and bribe a national leader. But he is a desperate man right now, and so I think he was playing with alternative economic models that that could have seemed attractive. But this brings up another question about Zelensky. You do understand the Russians aren't going to negotiate with him. They don't view him as the legitimate leader. They've said that over and over and over again. He's not the legitimate leader. So, one of the things before we even talk about anything down the road, Zelensky's got to go. I think when you have leaders, calling him out for what was perceived as a bribe, it's just an indication that Zelensky's lost touch with reality, and he's not long for the presidency of Ukraine. That's my assessment. Now, of course, we may be having this conversation in 2 years, and Zelensky still be president, which means that I was wrong. But right now, my money's on the fact that Zelensky is on his way to being former president of Ukraine sooner rather than later.
I don't know if you saw the Fareed Zakaria's program on CNN, in which he was trying to convince everybody that with the conflict in Syria, the way that Russia left Syria, and right now with Armenia, Azerbaijan, with the conflict in Ukraine, there are so much we can count on that and make new policies and be more aggressive toward Russia, because at the end of the day, if you remember those days of Soviet Union, we thought that they're so strong, but at the end of the day, they collapsed. He seems to believe that the same case makes sense for Russia today. Is there any sort of similarity, in your opinion, between the Soviet Union in those days and Russia right now?
None. And Fareed Zakaria is a very weak analyst, always has been, but he's weaker by the fact that he just simply doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not a Russian expert. He hasn't been to Russia. And he's not much of a historian either. The Soviet Union in the 1980s, at the time of Gorbachev, was a nation that was, had sunk into stagnation during the time of Brezhnev in the 70s, and had not quite figured out how to make a transition out of a system where the old guard had held on too long. Brezhnev, then Andropov, then Chernenko, and then all around them, because even when Gorbachev came in, you still had, a presidium that was stacked to the decks with the old guard, people who were holding on to a system that wasn't succeeding. It hadn't failed, but it wasn't succeeding to the level that it needed to be successful. And Gorbachev came in with some dramatic ideas. He basically declared a revolution. Nobody really focuses on this because we in the West, we get caught up with words like democracy and all this kind of stuff. But, in 1988, he held the 19th All-Party Conference, Union Conference, very rare event in the Soviet communist system. And it's a necessary step to make changes. And he basically carried out a revolution on the spot over the course of a week, basically transitioning the Soviet Union from, the Communist Party controlled, where the general secretary ran the shop, to moving towards representative democracy where you would have a people's Soviet of people elected by the people, not Communist Party officials elected by the party, ruled by a president who would be elected by these people. This was Gorbachev's vision. It was revolutionary. It doesn't get any credit for being that. And he started a process that, you know, set him up for failure because he didn't have a plan. See, he thought that he would start something and that capitalism would just happen. But capitalism in a society that was stagnant. Remember, the Soviet system wasn't a vibrant, dynamic system. It was a static, stultifying, decaying system that still worked. It's a lot like, you know, 50-year-old plumbing in a 50-year-old house. You know, you can put in new siding, you can put in all this stuff, but at the end of the day, you got leaky pipes. You know, and the leaky pipes are getting in the foundation, and you got to change the pipes. But he didn't. He thought he could put a new roof on it, put a new siding on it, and put paint on the walls, and he's got a viable home. No. You got a lot of problems with this house. And the Soviet Union had a lot of problems. The biggest problem he has is a guy named Boris Yeltsin, because in transitioning to this democracy model, what he didn't foresee is Yeltsin basically shutting down the Communist Party of Russia, which is the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Even though they called it the Soviet Union, lorded over everything, but it was really held up by the taxes and the economy of Russia propped that Communist Party of the Soviet Union up. And when Yeltsin said, "Now we're pulling the plug on that," that was the end of income, that was the end of viability, and basically that was the end of the Soviet Union. That system doesn't exist in Russia today. See, Fareed Zakaria's model is just 180 degrees off. Vladimir Putin actually came from the collapse of this system that we talked about. The pipes all burst, the electricity, you know, when wire the fire, the house burned down, and there's ruins. And Putin came in and built it back up, and he built it the right way, focused on getting solid foundations in there, focused on getting, you know, good frame put in, quality electrical. The pipes are good; they're not leaking. Good water system. Built it up until now you have this solid home. Now, what Fareed Zakaria wants you to do is take a look at the home that existed in 1990 from the outside, you know, new walls, new roof, and go, see that home? That collapsed. Now look at the home that Putin's in. New roof, new walls, new paint job. That's going to collapse too. It ain't collapsing. Fareed, go to Russia. Go to Russia. See the Russians. You know, one of the things that I saw in the end of the Soviet times was that Russians had fallen out of love with Russia. They were looking to the West for inspiration. The West will save us. And that was sort of Gorbachev's go-to thing. The West will save us. When Ronald Reagan left, Gorbachev was looking to George Herbert Walker Bush to come in with investments and all this stuff. And I remember reading Jack Matlock's wonderful book, Anatomy of Autopsy of an Empire, about the final days of the Soviet Union. You know, he kept writing saying, "Hey, Bush, you got to act now." And Bush said, "No, I'm going to do a policy review. We're going to hold off." One of the key things was the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, because they needed this treaty so that, you know, Yeltsin or Gorbachev could get the defense industry sized properly for what was to come, because it was a huge part of their economy. You have these cities that are run on the income derived from building missiles and all this. And Yeltsin wanted to bring that under control. And but to do that, you need this treaty. And Bush wouldn't sign the treaty until the very end. Signed it on July 31st, I believe, of 1991. 17 days later, there's a coup. You know why there was a coup? There was a lot of reasons why there was a coup, but the straw that broke the camel's back was that the defense industry had this missile called the Courier. And it was a small ICBM. And because the INF treaty came in, stripped away the SS-20, SS-12, a bunch of other systems, um, there was no growth. The defense industry was stagnant. And Gorbachev switched over to a system called sort of a pay-as-you-go system called Kozur self-financing. But that's not the way defense industry. So they ran out of money. They have no money. I mean, I'm talking about when you talk about a factory town, you're talking about the schools are paid for by the factory, all the jobs, everything. There's no money. Schools don't have money. Stores are empty. Roads aren't getting repaired. The whole system is just falling down. So one of the things that they had going for them was this small ICBM project, the Courier. And it was getting ready to go into testing. They had produced, like 15 of these things, and they're starting to test launch them, and they want to get into serial production because now you start cranking out, missiles, money comes in, they can start paying people. And this was very important for the defense industry, very important for them and for the military as a whole. Gorbachev tried to shut down the Courier system in the spring of 1991. And basically the defense ministry said, screw him, keep it going. And they got to the point where they needed him to sign off on it. Right before Gorbachev went on vacation in Crimea, he signed an order saying, shut down the Courier system. Then he went off to Crimea. That's when they met in the sauna and went, this is the death knell of all of us. If the Courier system isn't funded, the defense industry starts collapsing, we lose relevance, it's done, we have to act now. So they all got drunk and agreed on running a coup d'etat. But the coup d'etat came from missiles, arms control. And that's why the START treaty was so important, but people don't talk about that. Bush waited too long. By the time they started to make action, it was too late. Gorbachev was out. Then you have Yeltsin. Yeltsin was a drunken disaster for 10 years. Interesting, National Security Archives just released a report on what's called the second long telegram. The first long telegram was written by George Kennan back in 1946 about it led to containment policy and the beginning of the Cold War. The 1994, written by a guy named Merriman, I believe his name is, it basically said, we're doing the wrong thing here in Russia. We're focused on political solutions, but we're ignoring the economic and the social, the things that make Russia work. We're sacrificing the Russian people so that we get a politically appeasing solution here that's temporary. It's not going to last. We're destroying Russia. That's what he straight up said. We're destroying Russia. And he's right. I mean, we can get into the particulars. The Yeltsin coup of October 1993. Most Americans aren't even aware of that. You do know that Boris Yeltsin put tanks in the street and fired tanks into the Russian parliament, declared war on Russian democracy, stormed the parliament, killed the parliamentarians, dissolved the parliament. And then what did we do to promote democracy? We didn't say a damn thing. We allowed him to cook an election in December that was supposed to, put in the people he wanted. But he's so bad that he lost that election. Now he had a really bad parliament. And now what we're doing is trying to play catch up to get Boris Yeltsin. That's right. We bought him. We put him in 1996. We installed Boris Yeltsin. He shouldn't have been the president. He had no call. But we were doing that. And this guy was calling out saying, this has failed. We're destroying Russia. We're in the process of literally allowing Russia to be destroyed so that we can have a politically satisfying solution. It was suppressed. For decades, nobody was allowed to talk about this cable because it exposed the god-awful truth about America's policy towards Russia. Well, it's been released now by the National Security Archives. That's what we did to Russia in the 1990s. Putin came in and spent the last quarter of a century fixing this. Is Russia perfect? Hell no. Does Russia have a lot of problems? Hell yes. Is Russia perfect? No. But it's a heck of a lot better than the Soviet Union of the 1990s, late 1980s, early 1990s. Russia is a solid place. Travel to Russia. The Russian people love Russia. They love being Russia. They're proud of being Russia. These aren't people that are looking for, salvation from foreign shores. These are people looking around them saying, "Yeah, Ruski, I'm a Russian. I'm proud of being a Russian. We're doing okay, and we're not going to yield an inch Fareed Zakaria has no clue what he's talking about, none whatsoever. But the beauty of it is, and this is a point I just tried to make over and over again, the Russian people, there was a time when in the West, we could have people talk about Russia, and the Russian people listening going, oh my God, they don't like us in the West. We have to change. We're not proud of who we are. We're ashamed of being Russia. We have to be what the West wants us to be. Today, the Russian be free who? We don't care. They don't care. They don't care what you and I are talking about. They don't care any of this because they're Russians. They care about Russia. They love Russia. They're proud of Russia. And all of those Westerners out here sniping away and thinking we know best and we can do this, that, and the other thing, they're not even tuned in. So Fareed is just dead wrong, 100% wrong.
It seems that they love Boris Yeltsin, as you mentioned, and we can understand the hatred toward Putin right now. But do you see any sort of mindset on the part of the West that they can get someone like Yeltsin in the future? That's why they're trying to continue this.
But again, you missed the point. I'm sure we think we can get somebody like Yeltsin. I'm sure we have people out there, what do you think Navalny was? An artificial construct of the West who had no viability whatsoever in Russia. None. I'm sure we think there's somebody out there we could. The Russians don't care. I have a plan right now for Mars. I'm thinking, within 6 years of Musk getting to Mars, we should have 6-lane highways because I think we need a lot of room to maneuver. 6-lane highways, and I've written up some papers about the kind of highway construction I want, and I have some ideas about the government and all that. Do you think Elon Musk is losing any sleep at night because Scott Ritter thinks he knows best about what life is going to be on Mars through what Elon Musk, or is Elon Musk solely focused on what he's doing? He doesn't care about Scott Ritter. The Russians don't care about any of this nonsense because it just doesn't matter. As Putin said, Russia didn't reject the West. The West rejected Russia, and Russia has adapted and is moving on. They're not losing any sleep over this. They don't need us. They don't want us. They don't cherish us. They're not waiting for us. They have moved on. Would they like a situation where things were normal? Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? But the day where Russia believes that its existential existence is linked to the West is over. Russia is Russia. Will stand on its own 2 feet. That's it. So we can sit here and talk about, who we want to come in after Putin. It doesn't matter. It's like me trying to build roads on Mars. It just doesn't matter.